Old man abandoned by his two children. You won't believe what happened when they tried to claim their share of the inheritance. Don Ramon was an 80-year-old man who lived alone in a modest house on the outskirts of the city. He had worked all his life as an accountant for a company and had retired 10 years ago. His wife had passed away 5 years earlier, and since then, he had felt very lonely. His two children, Carlos and Sofia, were his only family, but they barely visited him or called him. They were too busy with their own lives and didn't care much about their father. One day, Carlos and Sofia came to Don Ramon's house with news that left him frozen. They told him they had decided to send him to a nursing home because they couldn't take care of him. They said it was the best thing for him, that he would be well looked after and have company there, and that they would visit him from time to time. Don Ramon couldn't believe what he was hearing. He begged them not to do it, saying he didn't want to go to a nursing home, that he preferred to stay in his house where he had his memories and belongings. He told them he wasn't a burden, that he could take care of himself, and all he needed was a bit of love and attention. But Carlos and Sofia didn't listen. They said they had already made up their minds and that there was no turning back. They told him they would come for him the next day, and he should get his things ready. Don Ramon felt devastated and abandoned by his children. He locked himself in his room and cried all night. The next day, Carlos and Sofia arrived with a van and packed up Don Ramon's few belongings. They told him to say goodbye to his house and get into the vehicle. Don Ramon didn't want to. He clung to the door and begged them to let him stay. Carlos and Sofia became impatient and dragged him forcefully. He resisted and shouted for help, but no one heard him, and no one came to his aid. Carlos and Sofia drove him to the nursing home, a gray, sad-looking building surrounded by a high wall and a metal gate. They entered and were greeted by a receptionist who asked them to fill out some paperwork. Don Ramon sat on a bench, looking around. He saw other elderly people who either looked at him with curiosity or indifference. Some were in wheelchairs, others walked with canes, and others just sat still, staring into space. Don Ramon felt like a stranger, an intruder, discarded. Carlos and Sofia finished the paperwork and approached Don Ramon, telling him everything was set and they had to leave. They told him to behave and get used to his new life. They said they would come back to see him soon, but Don Ramon knew it was a lie. He knew they wouldn't return, that they had forgotten about him, discarded him. Carlos and Sofia gave him a cold kiss on the cheek and left. Don Ramon watched them go, feeling a void in his chest. He was left alone, with no one who cared for him, no one who understood him. A woman approached Don Ramon and told him she was his caregiver, and her name was Lorena. She said she would take him to his room and show him around. She told him not to worry, that she would be there for him and make him feel at home. She told him to smile, that life was beautiful, and that it should be enjoyed. She told him to take her hand and follow her. Don Ramon looked at her and saw a young woman of about 25, with brown hair and green eyes, a sweet smile, and a soft voice. Don Ramon took her hand and followed her, not knowing why, but feeling a spark of joy, a spark of life. Carlos and Sofia were Don Ramon's children, but they were nothing like him. They were selfish, ambitious, and materialistic. They only cared about money, power, and fame. They had no affection for their father or anyone else, only for themselves. Carlos was a 40-year-old man who worked as a manager at a telecommunications company. He had a wife and 2 children, but he ignored them, dedicating himself only to his work and his lovers. He was a cold, calculating, and manipulative man, willing to step on others to get what he wanted. Sofia was a 38-year-old woman who worked as a fashion designer. She had a boyfriend and a daughter, but she despised them. She only cared about her image and whims. She was vain, superficial, and arrogant, and didn't mind humiliating others to feel superior. Carlos and Sofia abandoned their father in a nursing home because they didn't want to take care of him. They thought he was a burden and that he contributed nothing to their lives. They were just waiting for him to die so they could inherit his money and properties. What they didn't know was that Don Ramon had a secret that would change their plans. One day, Carlos and Sofia received unexpected news. Their father had passed away, and they were summoned for the reading of his will. They believed it was their lucky day and that they would finally get what was rightfully theirs. They dressed in their best suits and went to the office of the notary, a serious and formal man named Don Jose. Don Jose greeted them courteously and invited them into his office, where a woman was waiting, looking at them with curiosity. She was a young woman, around 25 years old, with brown hair and green eyes, a sweet smile, and a soft voice. It was Lorena, Don Ramon's caregiver. Carlos and Sofia were surprised to see her and wondered what she was doing there. Don Jose explained that she was one of the beneficiaries of Don Ramon's will and needed to be present for the reading. Carlos and Sofia were outraged, thinking it must be a mistake. How could their father have left anything to a stranger who surely had deceived and taken advantage of him? Don Jose asked them to calm down and listen carefully. He told them he was going to read Don Ramon's will and that they needed to respect his wishes. He said he would not tolerate any interruptions or comments, and they were to sit and remain silent. Don Jose opened the envelope containing the will and began to read. I, Don Ramon, being of sound mind and free will, declare this to be my final will and testament, which cancels any previous one. I dispose of my belongings as follows: to my children Carlos and Sofia, I leave the sum of 10 pesos each as a token of my affection and forgiveness. I hope they make good use of this money and change their ways. I hope they learn to value what truly matters in life and find happiness. To my caregiver Lorena, I leave the rest of my assets, which consist of several properties, bank accounts, stocks, jewelry, and valuable objects. I leave all this as a token of my gratitude and love. She has been the only person who treated me with respect and kindness. She has been the only person who made me feel alive and happy. She has been the only person who gave me hope and joy. She is my angel and my daughter at heart. Carlos and Sofia laughed and told him that was nonsense, that it made no sense. They said their father didn't love Lorena and had only used her. They said that their father wasn't her angel and she wasn't his daughter. They claimed that their father belonged to them and that they were his true children. Don Jose interrupted, telling them that enough was enough and that they should leave. He told them that their insults and threats wouldn't change anything and that they needed to respect Don Ramon's wishes and leave Lorena in peace. He ordered them to leave and never return. Carlos and Sofia left but were not willing to give up. They hired a shady lawyer named Fernando, who was the son of Elena, Don Ramon's old nemesis. Fernando assured them he had a plan to ensure Lorena lost everything she had gained. Fernando said he would discredit Lorena and portray her as a gold digger. He would prove that she had influenced Don Ramon to alter his will in her favor. Fernando promised Carlos and Sofia that they would inherit everything they deserved. Carlos and Sofia rejoiced and trusted Fernando, unaware that Fernando had a secret plan that would turn everything upside down. Lorena found herself entangled in a legal battle against Don Ramon's children, who had hired the unscrupulous Fernando as their lawyer. Fernando tried to discredit Lorena and paint her as a manipulator. Lorena defended herself with the help of her friend Miguel, a journalist who investigated Don Ramon's mysterious past. Miguel uncovered a hidden side of Don Ramon's life, filled with secrets and adventures. Lorena and Miguel had met at the nursing home when Miguel used to visit his grandmother, Dona Rosa, a lively and friendly old woman who had been friends with Don Ramon. It was Dona Rosa who introduced Lorena and Miguel. They became close, sharing their stories. Lorena told him she had grown up in an orphanage, learning to take care of others, while Miguel explained that as a journalist, he enjoyed investigating and writing about social issues. The two of them grew fond of each other and eventually fell in love. When Lorena learned of Don Ramon's death and the inheritance he had left her, she was overwhelmed. She didn't know how to handle the situation or what to do with so much money. Miguel supported her, reminding her that Don Ramon had left everything to her because he cared about her, and she should accept it with gratitude. He told her that Don Ramon had trusted her and that she should use the inheritance responsibly. However, when the news of the lawsuit filed by Don Ramon's children came, Lorena was terrified. She had no idea how to defend herself or what evidence to present. Miguel encouraged her, telling her not to be afraid and that he would stand by her. He believed that Don Ramon's children were ungrateful and that their lawyer, Fernando, was a fraud. Miguel came up with a plan to investigate Don Ramon's past further, hoping to uncover the truth that would defend Lorena's position. He dug through Don Ramon's documents, bank accounts, properties, and contacts, and was astonished to find that Don Ramon had amassed a significant fortune and traveled around the world. The more Miguel researched, the more he realized that Don Ramon had led an extraordinary life, full of secrets and intrigue. Miguel discovered that Don Ramon had been a former secret agent, working for multiple governments and involved in dangerous missions. Don Ramon had several false identities, using names like Ricardo, Raul, Roberto, René, and Rodrigo. He had participated in espionage, sabotage, rescue operations, infiltration, and even assassination missions. Don Ramon had crossed paths with influential figures and played a pivotal role in shaping history. Miguel revealed everything he had uncovered to Lorena, showing her the evidence. Lorena was astonished and struggled to believe what she was seeing. She wondered who Don Ramon really was and what her connection to him truly meant. Why had he hidden all this from her? Did Don Ramon care for her, or had he only used her? Miguel reassured Lorena, telling her not to doubt Don Ramon. He explained that Don Ramon had been a hero, and all of his actions were for a good cause. Miguel told her that Don Ramon was a good man who had changed his life for her. He was her angel, and she was his daughter at heart. Lorena believed Miguel and thanked him for his support. She trusted him and told him she was ready to continue uncovering Don Ramon's story and honor his memory. Miguel smiled and kissed her, telling her how much he admired and cared for her. He promised to be by her side and protect her, just as they both vowed to seek justice for Don Ramon. Lorena and Miguel continued to delve into Don Ramon's past, following the clues that led them to different countries. They discovered that Don Ramon had properties across the globe, which had served as hideouts and safe houses during his secret missions. Along the way, they also learned that Don Ramon had a long-standing enemy, a spy named Elena, who had pursued him for years and tried to kill him several times. Lorena and Miguel realized that Elena was behind the lawsuit filed by Don Ramon's children. She wanted to claim his fortune to fund her own sinister plans. Lorena and Miguel traveled the world, visiting places like France, Italy, Russia, China, and the United States, uncovering more of Don Ramon's past. They found documents, photos, and keepsakes that revealed the true nature of his life as a secret agent. They were shocked to find out that Don Ramon had been a man of action, with numerous talents and skills. He had mastered several languages, possessed extraordinary abilities, and had fought for noble causes, saving many lives along the way. At the same time, they discovered that Elena was a dangerous woman who had seduced Don Ramon and become his lover, only to later betray him and become his greatest rival. Lorena and Miguel realized that Elena had hired her son, Fernando, the lawyer representing Carlos and Sofia, to discredit Lorena and steal the inheritance. Elena had manipulated Don Ramon's children, using them as pawns in her larger scheme. Determined to stop Elena, Lorena and Miguel gathered all the evidence they had uncovered and presented it in court during the trial. There, they faced Carlos, Sofia, and Fernando, who looked at them with contempt. They also met Don Jose, the notary, who greeted them with sympathy. The judge observed with curiosity as Lorena and Miguel laid out their case, revealing Don Ramon's incredible life story, Elena's crimes as a spy, Fernando's complicity as a corrupt lawyer, and Carlos and Sofia's ingratitude as children. Carlos, Sofia, and Fernando tried to deny everything, calling Lorena and Miguel liars who had fabricated the story. They claimed Don Ramon had been a senile old man who had been manipulated by Lorena. They defended Elena as an innocent woman, slandering Lorena and praising Fernando as a reputable professional. They argued that Carlos and Sofia were the rightful heirs. The judge listened to both sides and reviewed the evidence carefully. After deliberating, the judge delivered his verdict. He declared that Don Ramon's will was valid and that Lorena was the rightful heir. He found Elena guilty of her crimes and ordered her arrest. He ruled that Fernando was complicit and should be sanctioned. Finally, he disinherited Carlos and Sofia, ordering them to pay the court fees. Lorena and Miguel were overjoyed, embracing one another. They had won the case and achieved justice for Don Ramon. They had defended his legacy, exposed Elena's malicious plans, and demonstrated their love for one another. Carlos and Sofia, humiliated, were left to lament their loss. Lorena and Miguel then confronted Elena, who turned out to be Fernando's mother. Elena admitted that she and Don Ramon had been lovers in the past, but he had betrayed her and left her for another woman, who was Carlos and Sofia's mother. Elena confessed that she had been the one to kill Don Ramon, injecting him with poison at the nursing home, and that she had planned to do the same to Lorena and Miguel. However, at that moment, Don Ramon appeared, alive and well. He had faked his death to escape Elena's clutches and protect Lorena. Don Ramon revealed that Lorena was, in fact, his biological daughter, born from a relationship with a woman who had died in childbirth. He had searched for Lorena for years until he finally found her. Don Ramon expressed his love for her and left everything to her. Don Ramon thanked Miguel for being his best friend and for helping protect Lorena. He turned to Carlos and Sofia, acknowledging them as his adopted children but stating that he could not forgive them for abandoning him. Finally, Don Ramon confronted Elena, urging her to surrender as the police were on their way. Elena refused and attempted to shoot Don Ramon, but Lorena jumped in front and took the bullet. Lorena fell to the ground, and Don Ramon rushed to her side, holding her as he cried. Elena used the distraction to flee, but Miguel chased after her and caught up with her. They struggled, and Elena fell off a cliff. Miguel returned to Don Ramon and Lorena, calling for an ambulance. Lorena was injured but still alive. Don Ramon told her he loved her and that everything was going to be fine. Lorena, in pain but smiling, told him she loved him too and that she was happy to have met him. Miguel, emotional, told both of them that he loved them and that they were his family. The three of them embraced and smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection and peace.